Imagine it's the peak of World War II in the Pacific. The vast ocean is a battlefield, and beneath the waves, a silent war is being waged. This is the story of one American submarine that defied all odds and etched its name into the annals of naval history. The USS Harder. Nicknamed the Destroyer Killer, its incredible feats left even the Japanese Imperial Navy in disbelief. The stage for our story is the WWII anchorage in the Philippines, a crucial naval base for the Japanese fleet. In the spring of 1944, this heavily fortified harbor was bristling with warships, preparing for a decisive confrontation with the American forces pushing across the Pacific. For the Allies, knowing the Japanese fleet's movements was a matter of life and death. The task of reconnaissance fell to the silent service the U.S. submarine fleet. Among them was the USS Harder, commanded by the audacious and brilliant Commander Samuel D. Dealey. Commander Dealey was no ordinary submarine captain. He was aggressive, innovative, and had a knack for being in the right place at the right time. His crew, a tight-knit band of skilled sailors, trusted him implicitly. They had already earned a reputation for their daring attacks, but what they were about to accomplish in the waters off WWII would become legendary. Their mission was simple in theory, but incredibly dangerous in practice. Sneak into enemy territory, report on fleet movements, and sink any targets of opportunity. What they found was more than just an opportunity. It was a chance to strike a blow so severe it would echo all the way back to Tokyo. The first hint of action came on the night of June 6th. The Harder was patrolling near the WWII Channel when its sonar operators picked up the telltale sound of propellers. Through the periscope, Dealey identified his first target, a Japanese destroyer. Most submarine commanders would be wary of engaging a destroyer head-on. These ships were fast, maneuverable, and specifically designed to hunt and kill submarines with their depth charges. They were the wolves of the sea, and submarines were their prey. But Dealey saw things differently. To him, a destroyer was just another target. With practiced calm, his crew prepared for battle. The torpedo data computer word, calculating the perfect firing solution. Dealey gave the order, and a spread of torpedoes shot from their tubes, silent messengers of destruction streaking through the dark water. Moments later, a series of thunderous explosions ripped through the night. The destroyer, caught completely by surprise, was torn apart. It was a textbook attack, executed with lethal precision. One down. But for the crew of the Harder, the night was just beginning. This single sinking was just the opening act of an incredible 4-day saga of destruction that would leave the enemy reeling and cement the Harder's legacy forever. The sinking of the first destroyer sent shockwaves through the Japanese forces at WWII. They knew a submarine was in their midst, but they couldn't pinpoint its location. Panic and confusion began to set in. The next day, June 7th, the Japanese sent out another destroyer on a search-and-destroy mission, determined to hunt down the audacious American sub that had breached their defenses. This was exactly what Commander Dealey was counting on. Instead of fleeing the area, he did the unthinkable. He turned the Harder around and decided to hunt the hunter. This was a high-stakes gamble. A destroyer actively searching for a submarine is the most dangerous enemy a submariner can face. Its crew would be on high alert, its sonar operators listening for the faintest sound. But Dealey had an ace up his sleeve. His own crew has superior skill and his unwavering nerve. He positioned the Harder directly in the path of the oncoming enemy warship. As the destroyer closed in, the tension inside the submarine was palpable. Every creak of the hull, every ping of the sonar, echoed in the silent compartment. Dealey waited, letting the destroyer get dangerously close. Too close for comfort for most. But his timing was impeccable. At the perfect moment, he fired. The torpedoes ran true, and another massive explosion rocked the sea. The second Japanese destroyer was mortally wounded, sinking beneath the waves. The crew of the Harder had done it again. They had taken on another dedicated submarine hunter and won. In just over 24 hours, 2 enemy destroyers were at the bottom of the sea. The Japanese command was now in a state of alarm. An unseen enemy was picking off their escorts one by one, right on their doorstep. The news of a second destroyer loss in as many days created chaos. The Japanese couldn't believe a single submarine could be so bold, so effective. They had to assume multiple American subs were coordinating an attack. Frantic, they scrambled more ships, hoping to overwhelm the underwater threat with sheer numbers. This played right into Commander Dealey's hands. The more ships they sent out, the more targets he had. He was turning their own tactics against them, using their response to create more opportunities. On the third day, June 9th, the Harder found itself in the most perilous situation yet. While maneuvering for another attack, Delhi spotted not 1, but 2 Japanese destroyers bearing down on his position. They had him cornered. The hunters had become the hunted. As depth charges began to rain down around the submarine, the Harder was violently shaken. The lights flickered, pipes burst, and the terrifying sound of explosions echoed through the hull. The crew worked furiously to control the damage, their training kicking in under immense pressure. For most submarines, this would have been the end. Trapped, damaged, and being pounded by depth charges. The logical move would be to dive deep, rig for silent running, and pray for escape. But Sam Delhi was not a logical commander in the traditional sense. He was a predator. As the destroyers passed overhead, preparing for another run, Delhi saw his chance. Instead of hiding, he ordered the Harder to periscope depth. Peeking above the waves in the middle of a depth charge attack, he lined up a shot on one of the destroyers. It was an act of almost unbelievable audacity. He fired his bow tubes, sending torpedoes straight at the warship that had just been trying to kill him. A direct hit. The destroyer erupted in a fireball. But he wasn't done. As the crew of the second destroyer stared in shock at their sister ship's destruction, Dealey swung the Harder around and fired his stern tubes. Another hit. In a matter of minutes, in the midst of a life-or-death struggle, the Harder had turned the tables and sunk both of its attackers. 3 days, 4 destroyers. It was a feat unheard of in naval warfare. The Japanese fleet was now in a state of utter disbelief and disarray. Their anti-submarine patrols were being systematically annihilated. Their destroyer screen, meant to protect their valuable aircraft carriers and battleships, was crumbling. On the 4th day, June 10th, Dealey spotted another destroyer. By now, the crew of the Harder operated like a well-oiled machine. The attack was swift, professional, and deadly. The 5th torpedo found its mark, and the 5th destroyer in just 4 days was sent to the ocean floor. The USS Harder had single-handedly crippled the Japanese destroyer screen at WWII. The impact of these actions was immense. Commander Dealey's patrol reports provided critical intelligence that helped the U.S. Navy anticipate the Japanese fleet's movements, leading directly to the decisive American victory at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. For his incredible bravery and leadership during this patrol, Commander Sam Dealey was awarded the Medal of Honor. The USS Harder was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, and its nickname, Destroyer Killer, was forever cemented in history. Hey everyone, welcome back. Last time, we left off with the USS Harder, nicknamed the Destroyer Killer, having just sent its 4th Japanese destroyer to the bottom of the sea. The crew was ecstatic, but their commander, Sam Delhi, knew their mission wasn't over. They were still deep in enemy waters, specifically the WWII anchorage, the main staging area for the Japanese fleet. The victories were incredible, but they also painted a huge target on the Harder's back. Every ping from a Japanese sonar was a death sentence waiting to be carried out. After sinking the destroyer Tanikaze on June 9, 1944, Dealey didn't retreat. He did the exact opposite. He ordered the Harder to stay put, lurking just outside the enemy's main naval base. This was an incredibly bold, almost reckless move. The Japanese were now on high alert. They knew a submarine was out there, and they were hunting for it with a vengeance. Patrol planes crisscrossed the sky, and destroyers prowled the waters, their sonar constantly sweeping the depths. For the crew of the Harder, every moment was filled with tension. They were running low on torpedoes, food, and fresh air, but their morale, fueled by their recent successes, was sky high. Dealey's gamble was based on a simple, audacious idea. The Japanese wouldn't expect them to stick around. They'd assumed the sub would flee after causing so much chaos. By staying, the Harder became an invisible ghost, hiding in plain sight. The crew had to maintain absolute silence. A dropped wrench, a cough, anything could give away their position. They spent hours submerged, the air growing thick and stale, listening to the rhythmic thrum of enemy propellers passing overhead. It was a nerve-wracking waiting game. Delhi was waiting for one more shot, one more high-value target to complete their historic patrol. And then, on the evening of June 10th, they saw it. Through the periscope, a shape emerged against the fading light. It wasn't just any ship, it was another destroyer, steaming confidently, likely part of the massive search party sent to find them. The Japanese crew probably thought the American sub was long gone. They had no idea they were sailing directly into the jaws of the destroyer killer. The Harder had only 3 torpedoes left in its forward tubes. There was no room for error. This would be their final attack in this area, one way or another. Dealey lined up the shot. The tension inside the sub was suffocating. He gave the order. Fire 1. Fire 2.
Ow.
2 torpedoes streaked through the water. The crew held their breath, counting the seconds. Then, a massive explosion tore through the night, followed by another. The Japanese destroyer was hit squarely. It shuddered, broke apart, and began to sink rapidly. That was it. Number 5. In just 4 days, a single American submarine had sunk 5 Japanese destroyers. It was a feat so unbelievable, so unprecedented, that it would change the course of naval warfare. The victim was later identified, though debates continue. Some sources say it was the destroyer Hyanami, while others suggest it might have been another patrol vessel. Regardless of its name, it was the 5th major warship sent to the bottom by the Harder in less than 100 hours. For the Japanese Navy, this was a catastrophe. They couldn't comprehend how one submarine could inflict so much damage so quickly, right on their doorstep. Initial reports were met with disbelief in Tokyo. They thought it had to be a coordinated attack by a whole wolf pack of submarines, not the work of a single vessel. The loss of 5 destroyers in such a short span was a devastating blow. These ships weren't just escorts. They were vital components of the fleet, crucial for anti-submarine warfare and protecting the larger carriers and battleships. The Harder had effectively decapitated the local Japanese screening forces. This created a huge gap in their defenses and sowed chaos and paranoia among their naval commanders. The psychological impact was immense. Suddenly, no part of their impenetrable anchorage felt safe. The ghost in the water was real, and it was deadly. With his last forward torpedoes gone and his mission an overwhelming success, Delhi finally gave the order to head for home. The journey back was still perilous. The entire Japanese Navy in the area was now furiously hunting them. The Harder had to endure a grueling 48-hour depth charge attack. The sub was rocked by explosions, lights flickered, and pipes burst. The crew worked frantically to keep their boat from being crushed by the immense pressure and the relentless enemy assault. It was a testament to their skill and the submarine's robust construction that they managed to slip away. When the Harder finally surfaced and radioed in its report, the American commanders were stunned. 5 destroyers. It sounded too good to be true. They asked for confirmation, thinking there must be some mistake. But as intelligence confirmed the Japanese losses, the legend of the Harder and its commander, Sam Delhi, began to grow. The news electrified the U.S. Navy and the American public back home. It was a much-needed morale boost, a story of incredible daring and success against overwhelming odds. For his actions, Commander Sam Delhi was awarded the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration. His crew received the Presidential Unit Citation, recognizing their collective bravery and skill. The Harder's Fifth War Patrol is still considered one of the most successful submarine patrols in history. It wasn't just about the number of ships sunk. It was about where and how they were sunk. The Harder had charged into the enemy's lair and systematically dismantled its defenses, proving that a single well-commanded submarine could have a strategic impact far beyond its size. Tragically, the story of the Harder and Sam Delhi doesn't have a happy ending. Just 2 months later, on its 6th war patrol, the Harder was lost with all hands, including Commander Delhi. They were sunk by a Japanese escort vessel off the coast of the Philippines. The destroyer killer had finally met its match, but its legacy was already cemented. The Harder's incredible rampage in the WWII anchorage remains a legendary chapter in the annals of naval history, a story of courage, audacity, and unparalleled success that the Japanese couldn't believe, and the Americans would never forget. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series on the incredible naval battles of World War II. In our last episode, we left the USS Harder under the command of the legendary Samuel D. Daly, after its stunning success in sinking the destroyer Minazuki. The crew was ecstatic, but their mission was far from over. The Japanese fleet was still a massive threat, and Daly knew more opportunities were just over the horizon. The very next day, June 7, 1944, the Harder's hydrophones picked up the telltale sounds of another warship. It was the Japanese destroyer Hayanami, patrolling the same waters, likely searching for the submarine that had sunk its sister ship. Daly, ever the aggressor, didn't hesitate. He saw this not as a threat, but as another target. He maneuvered the Harder into a perfect attack position, a textbook example of submarine stalking. The crew worked in hushed, efficient silence, every man knowing his job. The tension in the control room must have been immense. They were hunting a destroyer, a ship specifically designed to hunt them. At the critical moment, Daly gave the order: Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. 3 torpedoes sped towards the unsuspecting Hayanami. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity. Then, a series of violent explosions ripped through the water. The Hayanami was hit hard. A lookout on the Harder's periscope watched as the destroyer listed heavily, smoke and flames pouring from its hull. Within minutes, the Hayanami broke apart and slipped beneath the waves. Another destroyer down. 2 destroyers in less than 24 hours. This was an unprecedented feat, and news of it would send shockwaves through the Japanese command. They were now dealing with a ghost, a silent killer they couldn't locate. For the crew of the Harder, there was a brief moment of celebration, but they knew the danger was now even greater. The area would be swarming with enemy anti-submarine patrols. Most submarine commanders would have taken this as a sign to leave the area and report their success. But Sam Delhi was not most commanders. He believed the Japanese fleet was still vulnerable, and his mission was to inflict as much damage as possible. He made the audacious decision to stay, to continue the hunt in the heart of enemy territory. It was a gamble that would test the limits of his crew's endurance and his own legendary nerve. The following day, June 8th, the Harder found itself in an even more precarious situation. While patrolling, they spotted not 1, but 2 more Japanese destroyers escorting a large tanker. This was a high-value convoy. Sinking the destroyers was one thing, but getting the tanker would disrupt the Japanese war effort's vital fuel supply. The problem was, attacking would mean taking on both escorts simultaneously. The odds were stacked against them. The destroyers were on high alert, actively pinging with their sonar, searching for the very submarine that was now lining them up in its sights. Delhi faced a difficult choice: attack and risk almost certain destruction, or let the convoy pass. True to his aggressive nature, Delhi chose to attack. he planned a daring, coordinated strike. He would fire at the lead destroyer first, then immediately shift his aim to the second one, all while trying to avoid their depth-charge reprisals. This required incredible timing and skill from his torpedo data computer team and the men in the torpedo rooms. He fired a spread of torpedoes at the lead destroyer, the Tanikaze. Moments later, explosions confirmed a direct hit. The Tanikaze was crippled, engulfed in flames, but there was no time to celebrate. The second destroyer was now charging directly at the Harder's position, its bow wave a clear sign of its deadly intent. Delhi had to act fast. He ordered a down-bubble maneuver, a rapid dive to get below the thermal layer of the ocean, which could confuse the enemy's sonar. As the Harder plunged deeper, the terrifying sound of depth charges began to echo through the hull. Explosions rocked the submarine, knocking out lights and sending loose gear flying. The crew had to hold on, enduring the concussion blasts that felt like giant hammer blows against the steel pressure hull. Each explosion was a roll of the dice, a chance that the next one would be the fatal blow. Miraculously, the Harder survived the onslaught. The crew, though shaken, worked frantically to control the damage and keep the submarine operational. After what seemed like an eternity, the sound of the pursuing destroyer faded. They had escaped, but Delhi wasn't finished. Despite the close call, his mind was already on the next target. He had sunk another destroyer, the Tanikaze, bringing his tally to 3 destroyers in just 3 days. The Japanese were now in a state of panic and disbelief. How could a single submarine be causing so much chaos and destruction right in their own backyard? They had no idea who they were up against. The next day, June 9th, would prove to be the climax of the Harder's legendary patrol. While searching for more targets, Delhi's periscope broke the surface to a stunning sight: 2 more Japanese destroyers escorting a large transport ship. It was another convoy, and Delhi was perfectly positioned for an ambush. By now, the crew of the Harder operated like a well-oiled machine, their confidence in their commander absolute. They had faced down destroyers and won, and they were ready to do it again. Delhi identified his targets and began his final approach. The atmosphere in the control room was electric. They were on the verge of accomplishing something no one had ever done before. He decided on a bold strategy, a down-the-throat shot. He would fire his bow torpedoes at one destroyer, then immediately execute a hard turn and fire his stern torpedoes at the other. It was an incredibly complex and risky maneuver that left no room for error. As the first destroyer closed in, Delhi fired. The torpedoes ran true, and a massive explosion tore the ship apart. One more destroyer was gone. But as the Harder turned to engage the second, the enemy vessel spotted the periscope and charged. It was a race against time. The Harder's crew scrambled to bring the stern tubes to bear. With the Japanese destroyer bearing down on them seconds from ramming, Delhi gave the final fire command. The stern torpedoes were launched. The crew held their breath. Explosions erupted, and the charging destroyer was stopped dead in its tracks, sinking rapidly. In a single, breathtaking engagement, the USS Harder had sunk to more destroyers, bringing the total to 5 enemy ships, 4 of them destroyers, in just 4 days. It was an accomplishment that was almost unbelievable. When the reports reached Pearl Harbor, Naval Command was initially skeptical. They couldn't believe one submarine could achieve such a feat. The USS Harder, the destroyer killer, had cemented its place in history. Commander Samuel Delhi would be awarded the Medal of Honor for his incredible courage and leadership. His actions not only crippled the Japanese fleet's anti-submarine capabilities in the region, but also provided a massive boost to Allied morale. The story of the Harder's 6th War Patrol is a testament to the skill, bravery, and sheer audacity of the men of the Silent Service. They were outnumbered and deep in enemy territory, but through ingenuity and unwavering courage, they achieved the impossible. After a brief but much-needed rest, Sam Delhi and the crew of the USS Harder were ready for action again. They had just accomplished the unthinkable, sinking 3 Japanese destroyers in a matter of days. Their morale was sky high, but they knew the job wasn't over. Their mission was still to disrupt enemy naval movements ahead of the American invasion of Saipan. The waters around the WWII naval base were still teeming with Japanese warships, and Delhi was determined to add more notches to the Harder's belt. He steered the submarine back towards the Sabutu Passage, the very choke point where they had found so much success. The crew, now seasoned veterans of these dangerous waters, moved with a quiet confidence. Every man knew his station. Every action was precise. They were a well-oiled machine, and their captain was a master of his craft. The tension was still there, of course. Every ping of the sonar, every shadow on the horizon could mean danger. But it was a focused tension, the kind that sharpens the senses and prepares you for the hunt. They were ready for whatever the Japanese Navy threw at them next. On the morning of June 9th, the Harder sound operators picked up the familiar sound of high-speed screws. Another Japanese destroyer was heading their way. Peering through the periscope, Delhi identified his target. It was the destroyer Tanikaze, a veteran warship that had been part of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Midway. The Tanikaze was moving fast, zigzagging as it patrolled the entrance to the anchorage. Sinking, it would be a challenge. The Japanese ship was on high alert, actively searching for the American sub that had been causing so much chaos. Delhi knew a traditional torpedo attack would be difficult. The Tanikaze's speed and erratic movements made it a tough target to lead. He needed to get in close, real close, to guarantee a hit. It was a risky strategy. Getting that close meant putting the Harder directly in the path of the destroyer, risking detection and a swift counterattack with depth charges. But risk was Sam Delhi's business. He made a bold decision. He would use a tactic that had served him well before a down-the-throat shot. The Harder maneuvered into a position directly in the Tanikaze's path. Through the periscope, Delhi could see the bone in her teeth, the white bow wave of the rapidly approaching destroyer. It was growing larger by the second. The tension on the bridge was palpable. The crew held their breath, trusting their captain completely. At a range of just 1,100 yards, Delhi gave the order. Fire 1, fire 2. 2 torpedoes sped away from the Harder, streaking towards the charging warship. On the bridge of the Tanikaze, lookouts likely spotted the telltale wakes of the torpedoes at the last second. The Japanese captain would have ordered a hard turn, but it was too late. The range was too short, the reaction time too slow. One of the torpedoes struck the Tanikaze squarely amidships, igniting its magazines in a massive, catastrophic explosion. The warship was ripped in half. The bow and stern rose vertically into the air before plunging beneath the waves. It was over in an instant. The once proud destroyer was gone. Another kill for the destroyer killer. 4 destroyers in less than 72 hours. It was an unprecedented feat. The crew of the Harder barely had time to celebrate. The explosion that sank the Tanikaze had also given away their position. Soon, the dreaded sound of depth charges echoed through the hull. Delhi immediately ordered a crash dive, taking the sub deep to evade the counterattack. The Japanese escort ships in the area were furious, dropping their explosive charges relentlessly, hoping to avenge the Tanikaze. For the next 2 hours, the Harder endured a hellish bombardment. The sub was tossed about violently with each nearby explosion. Lights flickered, pipes groaned under the immense pressure, and the crew braced themselves against the bulkheads. They were silent, listening to the cacophony of destruction outside, each man praying the hull would hold. Delhi, cool and composed as ever, expertly maneuvered his boat, changing depth and course, making the Harder the most difficult target possible. His calm demeanor was infectious, preventing panic and keeping his crew focused. They had been through this before, and they trusted their skipper to get them out of it again. Finally, After what seemed like an eternity, the explosions grew more distant and eventually stopped. They had escaped. With the immediate danger past, the harder cautiously surfaced under the cover of darkness. They were battered, but unbroken. The crew could finally take a moment to process what they had just accomplished. 4 destroyers sunk. It was a record that no other submarine had ever achieved, and likely never will. Neely knew their luck couldn't last forever. The Japanese were now hunting them with a vengeance. The waters around WWII were a death trap. Remaining in the area was suicide. Plus, their primary mission was almost complete. They had gathered crucial intelligence and, more importantly, had severely disrupted the Japanese fleet's preparations. The message from Admiral Christie a few days earlier had given them permission to leave the area once their mission was accomplished. The time had come. Delhi set a course away from the Sibatu Passage, heading for friendlier waters. They still had a few torpedoes left, and the patrol wasn't over yet. Who knew what other targets of opportunity might present themselves on the journey home? On June 10th, while transiting the Celebi Sea, fortune smiled on the harder one last time. Lookouts spotted not a warship, but a large, fully loaded Japanese transport ship escorted by a smaller vessel. While not as glamorous as a destroyer, a transport ship was still a valuable target. It carried supplies and possibly troops that were vital to the Japanese war effort. Sinking it would be another significant blow. Delhi wasn't one to pass up such an opportunity. He carefully maneuvered the harder into a perfect firing position. This was a classic submarine attack, much less risky than the head-on duels with destroyers. From a safe distance, he fired a spread of his remaining torpedoes. The crew waited, listening as the torpedoes ran their course. Soon, they were rewarded with the satisfying sound of multiple explosions. The transport ship was hit hard and began to list, smoke pouring from its hull. It was doomed. The harder had claimed its 5th victim in just 4 days. This final sinking capped off one of the most incredible war patrols in naval history. Sam Delhi and the crew of the USS Harder had single-handedly thrown a wrench into the plans of the Japanese Imperial Navy. The Japanese fleet commander, Admiral Ozawa, was shocked. The loss of 4 destroyers in such a short period in what was supposed to be a secure anchorage was a major blow. He was forced to conclude that a whole squadron of American submarines must be operating in the area. The idea that a single submarine could be responsible for so much destruction was simply unbelievable to him. This miscalculation had a profound impact. Fearing further losses, Ozawa delayed his fleet's departure from WWII. This delay would prove critical, as it gave the American forces more time to consolidate their positions for the upcoming Battle of the Philippine Sea. The actions of one submarine and its courageous crew had a strategic impact far beyond the ships they sank. For his incredible bravery and leadership during this patrol, Commander Samuel D. Delhi was recommended for the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration. His citation would read, in part, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. It was an honor he richly deserved." The USS Harder, now affectionately known as Hit M. Harder, became a legend throughout the U.S. Navy's submarine force. The story of their astonishing run against the Japanese fleet was told and retold, a testament to the skill, courage, and audacity of her crew. But their story wasn't over. After a period of refit and rest, the Harder and her celebrated captain would head back out to sea for their 6th war patrol. Tragically, it would be their last. The very aggression and fearlessness that made them so successful would ultimately lead them into one final dissequy. I'll leave one final fateful battle from which they would not return. The legacy of the USS Harder and Sam Delhi endures as a powerful example of what a small, determined group of individuals can achieve against overwhelming odds. Their patrol off WWII is a masterclass in submarine warfare, studied by naval officers to this day. They proved that courage, innovation, and a willingness to take calculated risks could change the course of a battle and even a war. The story of how one submarine sank 5 ships in 4 days is more than just a tally of sunken tonnage. It's a human story of bravery in the face of incredible danger. It's a reminder of the quiet heroes who served beneath the waves, fighting a lonely and perilous war. Their sacrifice and their incredible achievements should never be forgotten. Join us next time as we conclude the story of the USS Harder, exploring its final patrol and cementing its place in the annals of naval history. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more incredible stories from the past.